Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rethinking Legal Ops, where we have future-thinking conversations about how the integration of law and technology are changing the way we practice and look at law. I'm Aishwarya, Head of Legal and Partnerships at Speed Legal, your host. Here today we have an amazing guest, Caroline Ragan. She is the founder of Lumos Marketplace, which is an independent marketplace for small law firms to be able to compare different types of legal software, tools in order to optimize their legal operations. Wonderful to have you here with us today, Caroline.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Caroline, very curious to hear about what has your journey been so far and what got you to start Lumos and what are some of the things that you're doing there?
Yeah, so after completing law school, I was always very, interested in business before I went to law school. I wasn't someone who grew up planning to be a lawyer. So after I finished law school, I had already realized that legal tech was booming and I wanted to make law more efficient. And so I was working for a legal tech startup and basically I launched another legal tech product that was document automation for estate planning. And so I was very involved in strategy and basically I planned how to launch it in Canada. So I was very aware of all the competitors and the whole market, and I just saw it booming. And so we had a lot of competitors, and I thought that, I wanted a business for my own good that would be able to work with all of the vendors, because there were so many cool solutions, but it was also so early that I knew so many cool ones would pop up, because it was you would see them one after another. And I knew there were so many more problems to solve. And then also because we were selling that product mostly to smaller firms, so that I also saw that the solutions that did pop up, other marketplaces that were there to help solve the problem that there's actually too many products out there. They were mostly helping bigger firms that, number one, have a bigger budget, or they already have someone in-house doing their legal ops or legal tech, and they could hire a full-time role. Whereas smaller firms needed, basically, you could call it, how accountants will sometimes say they're a fractional CFO, or they'll give, whatever they call it, but just they'll be their outsourced CFO. Smaller firms needed that legal ops for legal ops.
That's great. And I especially love that you wanted to work mostly with the small law firms and saw the pain there, because there are, in fact, so many different types of solutions, but they're more sort of the pricing and everything is more sort of tailored towards the larger enterprise level companies or larger law firms. So that really resonates with me, because in my work as well, we focus a lot on SMEs. So that's very cool. And I love how you, after law school, you sort of didn't go the traditional path. You crafted your own, and that's very sort of entrepreneurial, and it's so inspiring to hear. So thank you for sharing.
My family would still like me to take the traditional path, but no. Yeah, it's just I was always into business, so that came quite naturally for me. And I was working with someone who I learned so much from when I was working for that document automation. So yeah.
That's great. I really find that inspiring, admire you for that. So Caroline, just as a first step, how can small law firms even begin to diagnose or figure out what their legal ops problems are?
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to define legal ops for myself. I mean, for your audience, but just in this context, I'm sure there's other definitions, but how I think of legal ops is really just business, but for a law firm. So in any other context, people would just call this business, but because we're working in a law firm, we call it legal ops. That's how I think of it. So I divide it into categories of business for a law firm, which I think of as, first is client acquisition. So that's getting the client to hear about you, your law firm. The second one is client intake. And then the third one I would say is pricing, client care, which would be any communication with the client. And then there's basically a big category, which is your deliverable. So whatever service they're actually paying for, and that's going to include a lot of subtasks, which would be legal research, attending court, and then actual legal advice, advising the client, or preparing a document, depending on the service. So how a big business can diagnose their legal ops problem, I would look at those categories, divide your business into those categories: client acquisition, client intake, and then the actual deliverable. And I would pick the lowest hanging fruit. So I would think, what's the smallest change you can make that will elicit the biggest results? So yeah, just pick which one you think you probably, whichever one you know less about is probably where you can make the biggest difference with the smallest effort. So that's where I would start putting more attention towards.
I really like how you put it, like pick like the biggest issue, because even with spending just a little bit, you can make a significant impact there. And just sort of going along those lines, when it comes to integrating tech solutions into legal ops strategy and deciding which tools to pick, and just to start to even think about technology, what do you think is the significance of having your legal ops strategy be made in such a way that it somehow integrates more tech rather than just more manual work or hiring more people or stuff like that?
So I actually don't necessarily think you should, has to include tech. I would say legal ops includes 3 things, or any business efficiencies. Anytime you're streamlining a business, it includes 3 things. So 1/3 would be training staff on processes. 1/3 would be using tech to either perform a process instead of a staff or just quicker. And then the last third would be making the processes easily replicable so they can be passed from one person to another without you have to retrain them. So the question is, when should we implement tech into our legal ops, right?
Yeah. Or how important it is to have tech at all, which you partially answered already.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone knows, like, as a lawyer, you're already thinking this, or a managing partner, you're already thinking tech is only as important and it allows you to actually deliver legal services more efficiently. Like, tech is not the end all be all. It's just a means to the end. So yeah, I think, as I said, it's 1/3 of the equation. So 1/3 is training staff, 1/3 is using tech, and another 1/3 is just being able to easily pass those 2 things on. So if you can't solve it by changing the process or training staff, then use tech to solve it. But I think nowadays, because it's new, there's so much legal tech out there, then there's just a lot more opportunities to solve a problem with tech rather than adding a process or improving your training.
That is interesting. And when you work with some of your own clients, just following up along those lines, what tends to be your process in asking them the questions that you need to ask in order to figure out whether they even need tech in the first place? What are the things that you ask about their process again?
I think you could always solve it with tech, but it's just that your time is such a limited resource. So you want to pick the lowest hanging fruit. And the biggest thing with tech is, like, there's so much tech out there, but it's what do you actually know how to use your tech? So even in our Gmail or Google Docs or Excel is a perfect example for me, because there's so much in Excel I don't know how to use. So it's like, don't implement tech unless you're gonna take the time to actually learn the features, or else it won't produce the results that it's supposed to, and it'll be a waste of time. So yeah, I would pick lowest hanging fruit. You're going to pick one pain that is the one you want to solve most, and then the other one try to solve with processes, and then also pick tech that has processes built in. So a lot of tech, so for example, a client portal, Moxo, has workflow built into it, and workflow is basically processes. So, like, if you have your process down and maybe your firm has been following this, but the only way to keep your staff following it is that it's written down in some process and you train them on it. Well, you could just have that automatically built into your workflow, and so your staff doesn't even, there's no chance that it won't be followed.
I see.
So tech that has processes built in is what I'm saying.
That is a very, very interesting point. And want to emphasize one of the things you said, a very good point, that do not implement tech unless you're going to learn the features and actually use it. It just reminds me of my own experiences, just like talking to people at law firms, and having worked at them in the past as well when I was in law school. There are so many proprietary systems that a lot of law firms will have. They're just outdated, or that no one even really knows about, but they're still sort of subscribing to them, or they're paying for them, and no one knows the features, or no one's using them, or some of them are they're literally Internet Explorer dependent. So you have to, if you have to use a search functionality of a particular tool, you're going to have to use Internet Explorer, and it's so painfully slow. And it's not just law firms, this is a problem in big four as well. So I was really liking how you were talking about the importance of just like the people and processes element and in making the tech solution even, viable or useful.
I guess I would say like maybe ask yourself a different question instead of what tech should I implement, which tech should I train our employees on? And that could be a tech that we're already using or a new one. And that shouldn't be the main question. It should be what should we spend we have, let's say 1 hour to train a week. What do we want to spend that training on? It could be Google Docs.
Yeah, exactly. Like whatever can get you like the most results, as you were saying. I really like how you put that. And Caroline, how do you think that law firms can gain a competitive edge if they start using more legal tech tools?
Okay, an interesting question. So there's two angles. So one angle is how can you market yourself better? And then one angle is actually how can you gain a competitive edge? And my answers to both are completely different. So for the first, how can you gain a competitive edge? I'm going to make a reference to Web3. So for anyone that doesn't hear that word often, it's like any blockchain or crypto, that whole industry is Web3. And in Web3, I don't know why, but they've somehow normalized, like they act like everyone should learn about blockchain, which I realized after a while is so weird, because once I learned that a blockchain is essentially a database, then I realized like, why are we acting like the average person needs to learn about databases? Because outside of there, only engineers are going to go worry about what a database is. Like you never hear like, oh, have you heard of what this kind of database is? It's just weird. So they have this saying that a good Web3 product looks like a Web2 product. And all that means is that a good delivery of a good service, you won't know how it happens or the technology behind it, because it's just delivered to you seamlessly. So yeah, that was a long metaphor to just explain the point that I guess the role of lawyer in that has implemented technology well is that it shouldn't matter to the client at all what technology you're using. If the service is document preparation, then they're delivered that document so seamlessly that they have no idea what technology you've used or if you've used technology. And one thing I also talk about in tech a lot is that you should always be where your clients are in terms of communication channels. So like if they like to talk on the phone, you should be on the phone. If they like to if they're working out of incubator, you should work at that incubator, or like whatever online channels they use. In my opinion, you should be on those channels. So yeah, so like they should never have to go and hop over to whatever. I shouldn't say never. I shouldn't say never, because client portals, like I do think those are useful, and sometimes they have to communicate with you on the client portal. But yeah, I'm just saying the service should be delivered so seamlessly that they don't know what tech you are using. That's your tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then I have an answer in the marketing side to it, but do you have anything to say on that point?
Yeah. No, that is interesting how you're talking more about like your client shouldn't even know that you're using any tech tool. It should be so seamless. It should just make all your operations so smooth and so efficient that you can the result should just be that you can deliver your services to your clients a little bit better. It shouldn't be something that the client should be worried about or something that they should have to, learn to use or something like that. I really like that. It's a very interesting perspective, because I've always been thinking so far that, like maybe like law firms that are a bit more like, that are a bit more like tech driven, like, that are more proactive. I mean, there is DLA Piper, that's always kind of been, one of the law firms that's like quick to adopt new tools. White and Case is another example. And I've always felt that maybe these firms have managed to inspire a little more confidence from their like other tech clients. And I don't have any data to support this, but I've always wondered that, like, is it more helpful for a non-lawyer to look at a lawyer who uses tech and is more savvy with tech, to trust them a little bit more, that I trust you to just do my work a little bit better because you're more dependent on tech, so you're not as old-fashioned maybe, or you're not as like traditional, and you're more forward thinking.
I mean, I agree completely, but that goes back to spend time where your clients are. So if your clients are startup founders, then 100%, I would love to hear that you use lots of tech, and I hope you are further like you know more tech than me. But that's only because I work in tech. So I think that just like if you're a corporate lawyer, then yes, 100% be very tech forward. But if you're not a corporate lawyer, then that's completely different. Is my opinion.
Interesting. That is very interesting. You added this like other side to it, like, maybe like to some clients, but to like others, maybe it doesn't matter as much. Very interesting. Thank you for that perspective. And how do you think, in general, the role of lawyers, whether that's in in-house teams or it's in law firm teams, how is that changing as we're going through this era of digital transformation of law and more tech, more data-driven legal advice being asked for? And
yeah, so I think traditionally and still in big firms, if it's anything in terms of like knowledge of what vendors are out there or sourcing vendors or being trained on technology, you sort of pass that role to someone else, like your in-house tech person. But I just think that it's such a big part of practicing today, especially because part of what you're doing practicing is working with staff and paralegals, and they're the ones that need to be able to use it. Is you should actually, like, it's worth it to consider that part of your skill set. For example, in marketing, and this is probably way more so in marketing, there's so many tools out there that, like, marketing is essentially just knowing what tools to use. It's not theory or all of this. It's just knowing what tools do what and basically putting pieces of a puzzle together. And I think it would just be irresponsible anymore to sort of pass that task off to someone else, because it's such a core part. It's the same thing. You need to put pieces of a puzzle together. Like if you're instructing your paralegal what to do, you need to tell them, use this feature, like this part of this software to do this, and to do it most efficiently and with the best accuracy. So
very interesting. And also, just earlier, I think we were like talking about, how there's like more of a reliance on tech, and like how it's better for like maybe corporate lawyers to use more tech. Do you also think that it is becoming more and more important for lawyers to be able to leverage data insights and to craft, whether that is for crafting legal solutions for their clients or whether that's for their own internal purposes? How important is data today?
Okay, so when I was originally thinking about this question, I was thinking it in terms of firm growth. So marketing data, which I think 100% is really important. Like you're looking at your Google Analytics and how people are interacting with your site. But I actually, for like, if you're not thinking in terms of marketing or firm growth, I'm going to be honest and say I don't totally know. I don't think I have a super intelligent answer for that. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave that blank. I don't think I'm the right person to ask it unless it's in terms of answer and unless it's in terms of marketing. Then data is so important. Just segment your lists, like who you're communicating with, even if you are a corporate lawyer and let's say you want tech founders. And if you do any sort of engagement with them, like over time to keep them engaged, you should maybe segment them on what type of tech they're in. Like if one's focused on AI and one's focused on virtual reality and one's focused on just plain old software, then maybe communicate with them differently.
I see. And when it also comes to giving legal advice to clients, do you think that do you see a need with like the people that you worked with so far, that clients are asking for more like sort of concrete advice? Like, tell me how many percentage of my contracts are bad, or what's the percentage, what's the risk ratio, like, for this particular clause, rather than just like, giving me like written legal advice, telling me to like change something in my contract or actually changing something in my contract. Do you see that a little bit in your work as well as a demand that law firms are getting?
Wait, do you mean like how clients are asking for their contracts to be reviewed?
Yeah. Like, or the type of advice they're asking. Are they asking lawyers to maybe support some of the advice they're giving with like data insights that, we've looked at your contracts, and with this particular vendor, 65% of the time you've had this particular issue, or just putting those sort of numbers and like metrics, rather than just being like, in this contract, I'll just go ahead and change the wording and we'll go from here. But having more of a bird's eye view of the way disputes are arising for a particular client, or like what their concerns are in like the larger scheme of their contracts, rather than just focusing on.
Well, okay, so I would start off with a disclaimer that because I'm not working in like that area, I wouldn't really, like, I don't think I have an answer for exactly that. But I do think at least that the other founders I am close with, I expect their firms to have like you could say bird's eye view or long-term view of how to keep their costs down. And that will retain them over the long term, because as a founder, like, we think so much about we call it the lifetime value of a client. And we think that, like, keeping a client is worth it compared to having to retain a new one. That, yeah, we would 100% appreciate like are lawyers implementing tech that will reduce their workload and reduce their billable hours, even if they're charging one less this month, then it's going to make it up in the long run. But I will also add that in terms of clients' needs, lawyer marketplaces is something I know very well, and I like all the multiple lawyer marketplaces that are out there. And what I mean by lawyer marketplace is where some are basically like a database where consumers can go and they can pick between different lawyers for different practice areas. So they're basically businesses that are streamlining how consumers find lawyers. And the ones that are doing the best are ones that will offer very like contract review for a really small price for small businesses. So flat fee contract review for like, let's say a 4 or 5 to 10 page contract.
Very interesting. And what are some of the have you seen any trends in how maybe people have been like picking lawyers from like, marketplaces? What are some of like the big considerations do you see? Do you see it more and from like an SME or like small law firm perspective? Like what makes them most competitive?
Flat fee pricing, and I would say what makes them most competitive is like having a small service you can purchase to start with, and then moving up from there, which is really just good content marketing. Like you start with, let's say, so something that's really good to use client portals for is a lot of them will offer like downloadable either guides or like subscription-based legal services. So it's any service that is a small amount that you can start with, and then from there, then you're like more likely to retain them for a file.
I see. That's very interesting. It also reminds me of another conversation I had on this podcast. I was chatting with Colin Levy from Malbec, and he was also talking about how when it comes to a lot of marketing or making yourself competitive, especially for like legal tech tools, it's always that offer something small. And then, you slowly build that relationship with that client, and like, you can like go on to, to like more of a tailored service or something like that. But like those sort of like smaller and like more practical, like quick solutions, definitely. Good to also get your insights on that. And moving on just from like the marketing business aspects of, just legal tech or practicing law in general, and moving on to the more educational aspects of it, which I'm very passionate about personally. How do you think lawyers, or whether that's even non-lawyer team members, because now law firms are hiring other, experts, like they're hiring engineers, like they're hiring, I think, people with a background in biochemistry or biology are very, very sought after by law firms. So how would you suggest legal professionals or professionals that are somehow related to legal practice educate themselves about legal tech?
Yeah, so okay, I love how you're passionate about legal education, because I have been thinking about that a lot lately. I think there's so much, it's so important. Like I've just it's really hit me lately, and I've been speaking with a few other people in the industry, legal tech or like working with small firms, and I think there's a gap in the CPD courses that are available, and like how if someone wants to add a new practice area to their, we should build a lot more copy and paste templates for that. So yeah, I'd love to talk further about that angle of it. But to answer the question, how you should educate yourself on legal tech, what I would say is use a marketplace like Lumos or any other marketplace, and pick your top 3 to 4 vendors, and then go in and have a guide. There's guides out there that have like questions to ask vendors. So get someone educated, like you can download a guide or work with a consultant or download them from Lumos, and they'll tell you what questions to ask them. So instead of like paying, let's say, a consultant, you don't need to pay a consultant to pick your whole solution for you. Just if you ask the right questions that people that have regrets wish they would have asked, then you'll do fine. And then set up demos. But demos are quite mentally exhausting if you do a lot of them. So you don't want to just Google, because this is what you'd normally do. You'd Google your pain point, you'd find a solution out there, you'd do a demo with them, and then you sort of realize like, okay, this is the solution available for it. But if you use a marketplace, then you'll quickly come up with 3 to 5 competitors that all solve the same problem. And then you can set up demos with the one that is most suitable to you. And then also obviously take their price point into account. But that's pretty obvious. I think everyone knows that.
Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. And I think like one of the things I love about the legal tech industry in general is that people are just so excited about spreading more knowledge and information. And you'll find so many just as you're saying, Caroline, like you can find guides. There's also like, legal tech influencers like everywhere, like on Insta. You can find them on Instagram too, but also like LinkedIn and stuff where they'll just like post like, really funny reels about, like the pain points that exist in different types of firms. So if you relate with that, then, you could like go deeper into the resources that they put on their profiles and look into that. And also a lot of companies, including, Speed Legal, like, will have their own blogs. So you can check out the different things that they've been writing or talking about. And similar to Rethinking Legal Ops, there's like other podcasts that you could, also tune into. Like, if you're just curious, you're driving somewhere, or you're just like working and need something fun to listen to. And the other important element that I also see is law schools. Do you think, Caroline, that law schools should also be integrating legal tech into their curriculum to get students to learn to use them while they're still training as lawyers?
Yeah, for sure. I do think, and they are doing that. And paralegals too. I think paralegals should definitely be trained on legal tech because they're the ones doing it, are using it most of the time. And I was going to add on to the previous question. For paralegals, I would actually, instead of going and booking those demos yourself as a lawyer, if you have any staff, I would get them to do the demo even for you and just record it. You can record on Google Meets or Zoom and then build your report. So do the 3 demos, build your report, and then you can rewatch the demos and like skip through it, because I think efficiency and saving your mental energy is really important. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to add, because I do think it's really important for the audience, is go on Indeed or LinkedIn and look up the job ads that other law firms have posted and see what they're hiring for. Because there's quite a range, but they'll write in the responsibilities, because those are the people that have done that already and then learned, okay, I want to hire someone to do this. And they'll call them completely different titles, which is kind of the tricky part. Sometimes they'll be IT managers, sometimes they'll be HR managers, sometimes legal ops, sometimes legal tech, sometimes law firm administration. So
that is so interesting. That is a brilliant idea, because like you kind of get to see how other people are fixing their problems, and based on that you can maybe figure out your own processes. Very cool. Thank you, Caroline. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I learned a lot. I mean, the last idea you suggested about going and looking at Indeed, I'm going to write that one down. That's very good.
I hope it's practical. I always want to be practical. My favorite mentors are really practical, the ones giving me screenshots of exactly what they did. So
that's perfect. No, practicality is important because everyone is super busy. There's never enough time to do anything. So efficiency is key, I think, to driving businesses and like making important business decisions, which is why I also kind of like love your approaches to like approaching your clients, just like asking them the questions. Do you even need tech? Like, what is like your people and process elements? So really enjoyed talking with you, and I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from following this episode today. And once again, thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you.
All right. So just as a last note for our listeners, we're here every Thursday with more interesting episodes. So stay tuned. Follow Speed Legal. Check out Lumos. They're doing really cool work. And see you next time.